All right. Well, it looks like we are officially live. I'm extremely happy to have Nick Sicora here with us today of Disaster and Disability Consultants. Nick has owned it for 13 years and he's got some really interesting insights to share with us today. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks a lot, especially now that the rain stopped.
Yeah, I'm glad too. I'm in Pennsylvania. For those that don't know, Nick just over New Jersey. I think the sun's following and heading east right now, so it's good for both of us. So I'd love if you just gave us a really brief overview about yourself and what made you want to start your company and why it's gotten to the point it has today, over 13 years.
Okay, well, the reason why I started my company is because I found that I'm a person living with disabilities. I have spina bifida. I use a wheelchair for mobility, and one of the things I found that was sort of a hindrance or blocking me to gainful employment and to being excluded from a lot of situations was the safety factor. People were worried about what was happen if we had a fire, or we had an emergency. I had a medical emergency. What would they be able to do to help me? And I found in a lot of employment opportunities that that was one of the reasons why I wasn't hired. I was qualified, but I just wasn't. So I started studying a lot of this. I started to work with some employers who were willing to take a chance on me. And then what I did was I took more classes. I took FEMA classes, and I got involved. And then I went and started working for other employers. And then in 2007, I got laid off from a government contractor and decided that it was time for me to start my own company and to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities in all aspects of society by creating safer, more inclusive environments in the workplace and community.
That's awesome. That's absolutely fantastic. And
Okay.
you've done all of this over the course of the past 15 years. So what has building the business been like? Like, what was the first 3 years compared to where you're at now? How different is it?
The first 3 years was tough because I still had to prove myself in in a whole lot of cases, and I had to prove that I had enough knowledge, I had enough experience. As a person living with disabilities, I use a wheelchair, so when I walked into a room, people were hesitant to believe that I had the knowledge and the experience to be able to help them plan for emergencies, disasters, and crisis events.
Sure.
But once they heard me start talking and displaying my knowledge, they get a lot more confident. So it it was tough. It was very slow. It was mostly part time for me for the first 3 years. I had to use a lot of my network and offer jobs. I did a lot of freebies. I did a lot of free speaking all over the country, um, just to get my name out there and become more and more popular.
Awesome. Awesome. So how has COVID been for your business? I would imagine it's almost helped you of people understanding that they need to start planning for this. What does it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, it has. I'm a lot busier now today than I was, 6 months, a year ago. People always think things aren't going to happen to them. That's just how it is, and they feel that it's never going to impact me. It's never going to, and something like this or September 11th impacts a great number of people. so that this is when they start to plan, because they're in the middle of it. They've had to shut down. They don't know what to do. They don't know. And so they're looking for people like me who can help them be able to continue business operations in some form so that they can continue to make money, continue to help their employees and their local community.
Yeah. Awesome. So when they do come to you and they start looking to help you, what does your process look like? What can you start to share about what you do inside your business? Because I'm sure it's really pertinent to a lot of
Okay,
people.
well, I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what I was asking is, what
I
does your
lost you.
process look like?
Okay, now I got.
What does your process look like when you bring someone on?
Okay, well,
God.
okay, well, the first time that we bring a client on, the first thing that I want to ask them are, what are their pain points? What are their major problems for it now? Is it dealing with a specific incident? Is it dealing with an overall plan? Is it having the resources, the contacts? What exactly is their plan? And then what have they done so far? What do they currently have in place? And then we take it from there and we talk about what we can do, how much risk tolerance they have. Do they, are there additional resources that they need, that we have contacts with? Is there a different way or form to do this? Um, Sometimes we test exactly what they have in place. If they have a policy or a procedure, we'll do whether it be a tabletop drill or a functional drill or a full scale drill to test that procedure or policy, see how it works, and to see where there's uh, a, any kind of deficiency.
Yeah. Awesome.
And we, you know, uh, offer a potential solution.
Awesome. So I believe, your overall goal, as we had talked in the past and whatnot, is to help businesses stay open during any kind of event. Um, what's the
Yeah.
what's the specifics that go behind planning something like that? Like, what should someone start looking at inside of their own business today, for the people that are tuning in, so they can start to
Well,
come up on that goal?
okay. Well, the first thing any business owner really needs to evaluate is, what are the risks? What are the risks internally in the business, and what are the risks externally in the community and surrounding area that could impact their business operations? For example, if you're in Philadelphia, okay, city that we both probably know a little bit about, uh, a few years ago they had a major transit strike.
Mm-hmm.
That impacted business tremendously. So they have to know what the risks are. Then they have to know exactly what they can do to mitigate those risks. Whether it's providing a private transportation service to their employees to get them to and from offices, meetings, et cetera. In the example of a transit strike that I just used. Then we talk about, okay, how do we do that? Once we get them through that initial stage, we've evaluated it, we've come up with a plan, then we have to test it. We have to see if it actually works in a scenario-based type drill. And we go through, and that helps our client understand whether the employees understand the policy, whether they agree with it, whether it's functioning well, whether it is going to work in a real live situation. and then we make adaptions based on that, and then then they'll have that plan should that incident happen. But the biggest thing that a business owner has to understand is that they're not immune from any type of disaster happening. Even if they have these plans, they're, things will still happen, but they'll have the tools to respond and to be able to recover. Maybe not to quite to the level that they'd like to, but they will be able to recover and again resume full operations. Our goal is to keep them at least as operational as possible during the entire event.
Gotcha.
If that makes
Gotcha.
sense.
So what does that look like in the COVID-19 world for a lot of businesses?
Okay, for example, if we were one of the major industries right now that's being hit pretty hard are restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So because I'm sorry.
I just agreed with you on the restaurants. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No problem. So what happened was, a lot of states closed down restaurants, and the restaurants had employees and they had food, and food only has a short lifeline, so they had to find ways to maintain operations and not continually lose money in food and product. So a lot of them either started doing delivery or they started selling their food, like raw steak. There's a steakhouse that I know of that has basically turned their store into a grocery market, and they now, instead of cooking the steak and preparing it, they give you the raw steak. They give you ideas of how to cook it. They have a YouTube channel, and they're on YouTube. Their chef is there doing videos of how to prepare a lot of the meals that they have in the restaurant on a normal basis. It's a way to continue to get the business publicity, awareness, and to make some money and get them somewhat operational, even though they don't have diners in the actual restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's really huge. I think that was a great example with the restaurants. So a lot of your process in going through, you have the four separate stages: the identify, the mitigate, respond, and recover. So when you're in the last stage, we talked about responding a little bit. What does the recovery phase generally look like for a business? What can they do?
Well, a lot of these stages kind of mesh and blend together, and they're all going on at the same time, in a sense. But in order for the recovery phase to really is, they have to get to most normal operations, where they're producing, they're making money, their employees are back and working in some form, and the business is actually operational and running. So for that would be like a restaurant being allowed to have outside dining, or
Right.
or a factory moving their operations from one factory to another if they had a fire at the first factory.
Oh yeah. Okay. So that's getting full on back to coming full circle around, and you're good to go again, and you're preparing for the next disaster, basically. So,
well,
awesome.
Yeah, that's the thing, and the other thing in the recovery phase is you want to evaluate everything you've done up to that point. you want to evaluate your preparedness. You want to evaluate the actual response and look where there were flaws, where there were holes, ways that you can improve.
That's awesome.
That's a huge part of the recovery phase too.
Awesome. Awesome. So one of the other pieces that you do is, I know you do some government contracting. Sometimes that happens into, subcontracting and whatnot. I know a lot of people are always, a lot of, potential business owners, people think about starting a business, or maybe they just want to start figuring out how they can attain government contracts. Do you have any ideas for people like that to be able to take advantage of those?
Well, all the government agencies have a portal where they put contracts out to bid and they take information. You definitely need to register on those. You definitely need to get involved. We do a lot with the federal government, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and FEMA, and those, and we are a registered vendor with them. So, and what they do is they then, when they have a need, they look at the registered vendors and they look at their capabilities and the limitations of each vendor, and then they choose a vendor after a bid process goes on. And you have to write up a whole long proposal, and it's an arduous process, but it does work, and they it's a really great opportunity because government work, there's always funds for it. You
Right.
know that you're going to get paid if you're working with the federal government.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So what,
It,
go ahead. Do you have something to add?
no,
Okay. All right. What are there any sort of tidbits of information, or just best piece of advice, moving back into the disaster and disability piece of it? Are there any just pieces of advice that you can give to business owners to best prepare right now, as we start to wean off this conversation?
well, the best thing I can do, and the best piece of advice is to, one, realize that disasters happen, emergencies happen, crisis events happen. And when I talk about emergency, disaster, and crisis, I'm looking at things in a different size. That depends on the different size and scope. An emergency is like somebody getting sick or hurt in your building. A disaster is a fire, a flood in your building. A crisis event is like a tornado coming through your town and wiping out uh, a lot of the commerce. So they have to really understand what the risks are, and they can get a lot of that information from the local municipal governments in the towns where they have operations. Every town has to do a vulnerability study so that they can tell people what the hazards are, what the vulnerabilities are in that town. Once you know that, you can then look at how much risk you have and how much risk you're willing to take on. Some of these um, are very quick, easy fixes. Others take more time. Others take a lot of money, but don't take a lot of time. And so you have to evaluate exactly what your capabilities to respond to these are, and then look at ways to improve that ability to respond. That's partnering with a neighbor business, partnering with a group of neighbor businesses to come up with like a recovery team where 5 or 6 businesses pool money together and they work to reduce the risks and help recover all the local businesses in that community.
I imagine that it's a very overlooked thing, and a lot of people probably don't think to take action on it until it's too late in the process. Do you see that quite a bit?
Unfortunately, it does, and it goes back to that thing, Steve, that I said the first earlier. People don't think it's never going to happen to them. They think that, oh, disasters don't happen, emergencies don't happen. And years ago, before I started my business, I was a 911 operator for a while. And in that class, my instructor told us 90% of the population in the United States is going to activate the emergency alert system at one point in their life. So that means you're going to dial 911, whether it be to report a robbery, to report an injury, to report a fire. Everybody's going to do, 90% of the population is going to do that at least once. I can't tell you how many times I've dialed 911. It's been a lot. So we have to overcome that. And then once we do that, plan for it, prepare for it, because people work so hard at maintaining their businesses, at building their businesses, getting new clients, getting new opportunities, and then to have it taken away like that is so devastating. And it's happened. I was part of the response team for Hurricane Katrina years ago. 70% of the businesses that were impacted never reopened their doors. They never regained their business. That's a horrible statistic, especially when we have the majority of our our economy is so much based on small business.
Right. Wow, that is incredibly powerful. Thanks so much, Nick. And your overall story is just very inspirational too. Just to hear it and the struggles you dealt with, and then starting your own business as a disabled American and working up through the system and you're a very self-made human being, and that's incredibly amazing to see. Where can anybody find you? What's the best website and social media channels?
Okay, we are on Facebook at Disaster and Disability Consultants LLC. We have a website which is www.disability.com. That's currently down because we are upgrading it and doing new things with it. But we have that. We are at Twitter at Disaster DDC. And those are the basic channels that we have where you can reach us. We have our phone numbers. Our email address is disability.com. We can be reached that way. We've got our phone numbers attached to all of our social media, so you'll be able to reach us there too.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Nick. Truly an absolute pleasure. This is such a important topic to be talking about, especially during this time that so many people just don't. And I think you really brought it all together on the end with that finale you gave us. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity. We met through our involvement in a couple of different groups, and we're out there because we want to see businesses succeed, and especially veteran-owned businesses. We do a lot of work with them, and businesses that are owned by people with disabilities. Our economy is based on small business. So I thank you for the time. I thank you for allowing us to hopefully give your audience some tips and some good information that they can use, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Or
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.